welcome to the live Q&A. I'm Daisy, and this is...
I'm Jack.
I'm Jedi.
And we've also got Jen on Zoom. Is she here?
Hey!
Hello.
Hello.
Weird.
Yeah, it's really weird, isn't it? Can you see us, or can you...
It's really
can you
weird.
just see cameras?
I
Hello?
can see you and I can see myself.
Oh,
on
that
the
is
screen.
really weird. Oh, gosh. Okay,
Great.
well, it's so good to have you here, Jen. Thank you for joining us all the way from Zoom as well. It's so great. How are you doing?
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm good. I'm all right.
Yeah? We love that. Okay. I'm going to do some quick fire
Doing well,
questions
thanks.
quickly, but do you all want to go around and just say who you are, where you're from, what you're doing at the moment? Jen, do you want to start for us? Ooh, connections.
Sure. It's a bit. The connection's a bit patchy,
Okay, cool.
but I can kind of mostly work out what you're saying. Is it patchy from my end as well?
Not too bad. It's a bit delayed, but it's okay. Oh.
Famous last words.
Literally. Okay, we'll see if the connection works out. Jack and Dad,
Are
do you
we
want to
good?
tell us
Shall I go?
about who you are, what you do?
Sure. I'm Jack. I'm part of the Luminosity team and work at Tier Fund. And what do I do? Spend a lot of time in this room helping make Luminosity happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Jedi. I work with young people across the Northeast for an organization called Northeast Youth for Christ that some of you might know. And yes, just going around in schools, mentoring kids, enjoying it.
Awesome. And Jen, can you hear us? No? Okay.
Jennifer. I'm from Essex. Well, I'm originally from London, and I am a youth worker.
Hey, amazing. And then a quick fire round really quickly. Jedi, you gave me this question, this beautiful question. Do you put milk in before your cereal or afterwards? I think...
Definitely cereal in first.
Yeah, okay, a few.
Yeah, 100%.
Jen, yeah? Cereal in before the milk?
Oh, 100%.
Okay,
Cereal
good.
first.
Okay, we're in a panel with good hands, you know, guys. I'd be a bit worried if you said like milk first. That's a bit.
Yeah, that question has ended friendships before.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, and then next one. I feel like on the theme of this, do you put jam or cream on first on a scone or scone, or how do you say it actually? Do you say scone or scone?
Wow, so many questions there.
Yeah.
I would say scone,
Okay.
although I think I'm in the minority. And I would put cream on first.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I would actually put either on both so that there's enough, you know.
Ah, that's quite clever. Jen, what about you?
I call it a scone.
Oh,
and I'm jam
controversial.
first.
Yeah. Okay.
Jam
cool.
first.
Jam first.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, Jen. Oh dear. Oh dear. Okay, well, let's move
I feel
on
like
then quickly.
It sticks it. It glues it together better.
Okay, we'll move on. So we're going to be talking about quite a few things today, guys. We're talking about the leadership seminar, the racial justice seminar, the climate justice, and the friendship seminar. So we've got a lot to pack in 45 minutes. But we're just going to see how it goes. We're going to see where God takes us. If you have any questions, put them in the YouTube chat, and we'll love to answer as many as we can at the end. But I've made some questions from myself. If you're not watching live and you haven't actually watched the seminars, I very much encourage you to pause this quickly now, go watch the seminars and come back, and you'll be able to understand this a lot better. And also you'd have a lot more to think about and to discuss with your youth groups or maybe your families, whoever you're watching with, maybe even yourself and God. So I was thinking, let's start with leadership. Jen, I was actually texting you about this before as well. I'd love to hear your opinion about this. But do you think you're a better Christian if you work for the church? I've thought about this a lot when I was younger, like, oh, am I a better Christian if I actually am a church leader, or I'm a youth worker, or I'm a worship leader? What are your guys' opinions on that? Jen, do you want to give us your wisdom first?
Yeah, the reason why I wanted to address this is because I've actually recently just left my job as youth pastor at our local church. And it's so interesting because for me, I'm now 30, but growing up, all I wanted to do was work in ministry. That's all I wanted to do was work for my church. I think that is credit to having a really good youth group growing up. So I was passionate about being involved, and I was like, imagine getting paid to do stuff for Jesus. Like, it was just up there, and it was from a really, really good intention, but I just couldn't think of anything better. So now, like, I'm married, I've got kids, and I went on maternity leave, and then coming back from maternity leave, I really felt that I didn't want to go back into that. And it was very conflicting for me because I couldn't understand, why would God not want me to work for the church? Because for me, I'd married the two so closely together. So my answer to your question is it's not better. And God spoke so much to me about this whole thing of working for church and who he wants me to be. And actually, who I am and who you are is so much more important than where you work. Full stop. Whether it's a church or an organization or an industry, it doesn't even matter as much as who you are as a person. So talking from somebody who was literally working for the church about a month ago, and now technically I'm not, it doesn't make a difference. My value isn't placed on that. I'm not a better or worse Christian. I'm just myself, and it's literally just a job in a different organization.
Love that. Do you guys have anything to say about that?
I mean, I believe we're called to occupy all streets. So I think it can feel a bit better working within a Christian organization, and especially in the sense of keeping your faith level up, because, you know, you're surrounded with the word of God and like-minded people. But I think that, you know, you really get tested when you're working outside of that environment and bringing that culture in. I think, yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily say you're a better Christian for working in a Christian organization.
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying as well that there isn't like more holy work happening in the church compared to like happening elsewhere. Like as Christians, we are part of seeing the kingdom come and of bringing about like God's love and justice in the world, about demonstrating his love to those around us. And if we work in Tesco's, or we are a vet, or if we work in a big office, all of those spaces can be spaces where we worship and glorify God. And it's not that you can only do a job that glorifies God if it's in the church. And I think sometimes we get confused with this idea of being like, oh, that's kind of sacred work and that's kind of secular stuff, and they're two different things. But God calls us to be in all places so that all people can know him and we can see his kingdom come.
Love that. Another question that I had was, in Lee's seminar, he talked about, in order to be good leaders, we have to embrace our identity, because ultimately God is the person who created us, and he created us beautifully and wonderfully made. How do you guys embrace your identity, especially when you feel like, oh, I don't feel as if I'm doing the right thing at the moment, or oh, I feel really bad about myself and who I am, I'm jealous of that person? How are you comfortable in your own identity and who you are? How have you guys got around that?
Do you want to take that one first?
Thanks. I think, it's a really like difficult thing to build that kind of confidence in who you are, and to have that like self-assurance that like, okay, it's all right being me. And I think like I'm very passionate about a whole bunch of different things, but I often try and suppress that when I meet new people, because I'm like, I don't want to come across weird, or like I don't want them to stereotype me or box me into a certain place. And then I find myself reducing down who I am and who God's made me. And actually, like, really good friendships and good leadership comes when people can see that you're authentic and you have integrity. And actually, that's what appeals to people. That's what people want to see in their friends, and the kind of people they want to follow as well. And so actually, it's trusting that God has made us this way for a reason, and learning to be comfortable in that because God delights in it already.
Love that. Jen or Jado?
I would just add to that, completely agree, and I'll say that it reminds me that it's not all in my own strength, because I'm not perfect. And so when I do the job right, when I get things right, yes, I put in the effort, but it goes back to, God equipped me to do this. And it's that cliche. I feel like I'm going to have a lot of cliches today, but it's God doesn't call the qualifiers, but he qualifies who he calls. So I think that, just when you look at the Bible, there's so many people who felt like they weren't good enough that God still used. And that just reminds me that he can do the same for me.
Come on. Jen, have you got anything to say about that?
I mean, I second what both of the guys have said, but just also, I just know that on my own, like without God, I'm a mess. I'm just an absolute shambles. Like, it's just by his grace that he draws out the best parts of me, and kind of knowing that, like, like God knows every part of me, even like the bits that I want to hide and the bits that I don't really like about myself and the bits that you wouldn't put on display. And yet he still wants to use you, and yet he still thinks you're worthy of being involved in things and having a voice and all of that. And I think sometimes, like, when I might be struggling with part of myself, I think God knows about that already. Like, he actually knows already, and he doesn't care. Despite that, he still wants to use you. So I hold on to that as well.
Come on. And you guys are all amazing leaders. I've seen a bit of Jada. I don't know you very well, but I've seen you today and this morning as you preached, and it was incredible. Jen, I've seen you on like Luminosity team meetings, and obviously Jack as well. I've seen you a lot in the past few months. But you guys are leaders in your own way, but have you had to take risks in your leadership? And maybe just encourage us, because Lee said, as leaders, we have to take risks. If we want to be change makers in this world, we have to take those risks. Have you guys had examples of risks that you've taken? Maybe, Jack, you want to speak about climate change as well in this, and your process of trying to get climate justice with Tear Fund. But yeah, what are some examples, and how have you overcome those risks and those challenges?
I say one risk is kind of stepping into a place where maybe not everyone is going to love what you have to say or what you're thinking. And I am a natural people pleaser. Like, if I can just keep everyone happy, then I'm all good. And so actually leadership is really uncomfortable, because often it means making decisions that you feel like are the best and you've been praying into, and you're trying to do like what you feel God is calling you to, but not everyone might be happy with it, or some people might not think it's a good idea. And especially with things like climate change, on a fairly regular basis, there are people who are like, oh, I'm not sure like what you're doing is the right thing, or maybe you've lost Jesus because you're talking about the climate. And you're like, no, I'm doing this because I love Jesus.
Come on.
But to carry on leading into a space means that there are going to be people that kind of oppose that. And so it's making sure you're accountable with others. Like, don't just keep charging ahead and upset everybody. That's not leadership. But like, within kind of a group of people you're accountable to, just trusting that God can use you even if you can't keep everyone happy as you lead.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Jen, have you got any examples of that?
Yeah, funny story actually. It's actually how I came about being involved in Luminosity. So I was at New Wine in 2019, and it was my second time with my youth group. And off the back of that, I sent over an email to, I think it was to Lee, and I didn't know him. I didn't know anyone to do with Luminosity. And I'd said, like, you know what, like, I appreciate everything you're doing. I think the way that it's run is amazing. Like, loads of praise, like, no criticism. I said, I just think that there are areas where it could be better in terms of diversity and inclusion. Yeah. And, like, that was a risk for me because, like I said, like, I didn't want to come across critical. I wasn't trying to stir anything. I wasn't trying to cause any problems. But I was like, I can see things that maybe I would do differently. And I just want to maybe help and like point that out. And then from there we got talking, and like I met with some of the team, and like it's just been a real way to build relationship actually. But it's things like that. It's calling out things that you think, I can see that, and I don't know if other people can. So I'm not going to be scared to call that out and to say, hey, have you thought about doing it this way? Or actually, maybe this could be better. I think that takes risk and that takes leadership, because it might not always be well received. But when it is, it's powerful.
Wow. I'd love to come back to that point, but Jada, have you got anything to say on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, just to add, not too much that hasn't already been said, but when it comes to taking risks, I try and say this, change my what ifs into positives, because that helps me. I'm a very visual person, and so I'll be like, oh, what if this is a great idea and it helps one person? What if, someone needs to hear this? And so I think with pushing some of the mentoring courses and things we do within schools, sometimes it's like, oh, well, schools aren't really going to buy into this or think it's relevant, but we've actually, by doing that, seen so many more schools now, and we actually need more people on team to do what we're doing. But yeah,
that's awesome. It's crazy how when you take risks, actually, so much of the time it comes to positives. And maybe it's scary at first, but when it's a God-given risk and when it's driven by God, giving glory to God, actually a lot of the time it becomes so much more positive and more than we could ever dream of. And Jen, I'd really love to go back to your point of diversity, because one of the questions we had was actually, how do we make the church stand up to anti-racism, and how can we stand up to anti-racism? That's the wrong way of saying it. Be anti-racist. How do we as Christians stand up to anti-racism in our everyday, in our church communities, at New Wine, maybe in our friendship groups? I'd love you guys to chat more about that and into that and give us some wisdom. Jen, Jedi, Jack, would you like to say anything about that?
Jen, would you like to start?
Yeah, cool. I feel like it's a whole thing we could talk about for a very long time. I could talk about for a very long time. And I was trying to think about what would I say if it was just like a short Q&A. But I do think often we think, what can the church do? Or what can my church do? And I think break it down, like, what can my church do? What does that mean? What can this group of people, what can my youth group do? And then it actually comes down to, what can I do? I think, what can you do? Because you can't control what your church does. You can put things to your leaders, but ultimately, what can you do? And honestly, like, I look at my children who, like, both of my children are Black, and I think, what would I want for them? Just because we live in a predominantly white area, and I just think, somebody, go and be their friend. Go and be their friend and be their advocate, because there is nothing worse than being a minority. And a lot of us have experienced that in different ways. Like, you know what it's like to feel left out, or to feel different, or to feel a bit awkward. But so often, people of color can feel like that all the time, like just all the time in so many different settings. And you may not notice it, but I am like hyper aware of when I'm in a group. I'm just like a quick scan, and I'm hyper aware of race and of what color people are, because of the way that we've been conditioned. That's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just kind of how it is. But when I think about what you can do, get around those people, because it can be so uncomfortable. And like I said, there's so many other things you can do. But I would say find the people who are different, and it's not necessarily race. It could be class. It could be culture. There's so many different things, and stick with those people and learn about them and get alongside them and advocate for them, so that when there are things that need to be called out, like when, I don't know, somebody makes a racist joke, that person doesn't need to stick up for themselves. You can actually stick up for them, and you can be a voice and say, no, actually, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's okay. So that's my kind of overall, what can you do? Where can you start? Just take it on board and just broaden yourself. Find out about different cultures, and like eat new foods and listen to new music. Like submerge yourself in other cultures. That's my advice.
Love that. Thank you, Jen. Jado, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, I think thinking about what can my church do, you know, like Jen says, it boils down to the church as a home, and we all come from individual homes. Yeah. So, and I think that so many of the things we learn, whether consciously or unconsciously, or the things that we don't learn, you know, a change can happen in the homes. And so I think the more individual homes are changed, the more the society changes. And so I think, you know, if you're a young person and you've never had that chat in your family, just like we were talking about before, taking that risk and, you know, maybe opening up that conversation. And it is uncomfortable, but what's on the other side of that is knowledge, and, you know, and I think the more people you can bring into that conversation, there's so much access to content online and things that you can educate yourself with. And I think that once the homes change, the community changes.
Come on, I love that. Jack, have you got anything to say about that?
Yeah, I echo what Jen said earlier about leadership as well. And a big part of leadership is recognizing like how to empower others to lead as well. And so it's making space, say, actually, I don't need to lead this. Like, actually, you are gifted, and that's like you can like lead us in these ways. And in your church, maybe you've noticed that actually your leadership is more white than the congregation, and maybe like that's something worth talking with your youth worker about, or with others, of saying, why is our leadership more white than like what the rest of our church looks like, and how can we readdress this? Yes. Jen did an amazing thing of talking to Luminosity and of saying, actually, guys, we need to check this. Like, this isn't good for us as the church. We're all one body. How can we do that well? And thinking about a church context as well, Jen talked about making friends with people who might feel on the edges in school. Like, maybe we can do that as a church as well. Like, if there is a church near you that is like a Chinese church or a black majority church, is there a way that you and your youth group can get to know the young people in that church? And there can be ways of building relationship where so often the church is segregated. Yeah. So this stuff we can think about for ourselves, of thinking, okay, what's it look like to lead, and what's it look like to build better friendships, but also like, how can we do this in our church and in our family?
Come on. And Leanne, actually, in her seminar, if you've not watched Leanne's seminar, I urge you to do it really quickly, because it's absolutely incredible, and the wisdom that she gives is unbelievably amazing. And one thing that she said, she was quoting Martin Luther King Jr., and he said a brilliant thing, and he said, all it takes for injustice to prevail is for good people to do nothing. And that just hit me so much, because as Christians, we should be living like Jesus. And Jesus was the ultimate good person. He was a great person. He was an amazing person. He was awesome. So how can we stand up personally to these injustices? What are your guys' advice? Like, where do we start if we're just thinking to ourselves, wow, actually reflecting on it, I've not stood up to racism as much as I could do. Jen and Jada, I'd love to hear what you say, especially. How would you suggest that we do that?
I think it's very hard to stand for something when you don't understand it.
Yeah.
So I would say maybe the starting place is adding to your perspective, maybe. And that could be if there's a friend who's comfortable talking about maybe their experience, or there's like I said before, there's so much content online about people sharing their experiences, understanding a bit more and being willing to listen to what people have to say. Not to respond, but simply to understand. And I think once you understand that, okay, wow, this is what it feels like to go to the shop. This is what it feels like to walk out of the house. This is what it feels like to go on a jog. Yeah. This is what it feels like to walk down the street as a person who's black or brown or within any minority. And I think once you understand that, you can now go, okay, that's not right. I don't like feeling like this.
Yeah.
And understanding that, a lot of people feel like that all the time. And that can be a starting place to then represent that and stand up for that.
Jen, have you got anything to say about that?
No, I just agree, really. Like, there's no point trying to, well, there is point, but it's not as powerful to stand up for something unless you truly understand it. And once you've really got hold of that, and like, let's not forget, like, you pray and you can ask God, like, give me a true revelation of this, give me a true understanding, Holy Spirit, of what this is and why you hate it and why you're so against discrimination. And like, because Jesus cares about this stuff and we have access to him, we have access to kind of like fast track us to get that revelation and to understand what people are going through so that we can advocate for them. So stay prayed up.
Yeah, come on. And also, one of the questions that we got on Instagram was, why does God allow racial injustice? And I think, firstly, God doesn't allow racial injustice. That's something that we say, and we stand by that God is a God of all nations, of all people. He loves every single person equally. But maybe, why is there injustice in this world? It's a huge question. Why is there climate injustice, racial injustice, class injustice, where you live? How come that's an injustice? Why is there injustice in this world? Maybe you guys can chat about that a bit and give us an insight, maybe.
You want to do this?
It's a big question.
Or am I good?
I mean, I'm happy to start. I think one of the most beautiful things God gave us was, and most dangerous, is our free will.
Yeah.
The will to choose left or right. And I think, with that will, he gave us the earth to rule over and have dominion. And the dangerous thing is that we can choose against God. And in that same way, we can choose, to treat other people differently, to be unjust, to litter around. And a lot of that stuff is, I feel like it's learned, through your surrounding, through where you brought up. But I like that it's not the end of the story, because you can always, like we were saying before, add to your perspective. You can learn new ways, you can change. But yeah, I don't think God allows it. I think that we some of us choose to act in certain ways.
Yeah, wow.
I think a lot of it comes back to the scripture. And when you think about when sin entered the world, it was this moment of brokenness where our relationship with God was broken, where Adam and Eve hid from each other and their relationship with each other was broken, their relationship with the land was broken and the thorns grew and it was hard to grow food, and their relationship with themselves was broken because they didn't see who God had made them to be anymore. And it's those broken relationships that are then in the root of all of these different injustices that actually we fail to recognize that each other are created in the image of God and to value each other enough. And we fail to recognize that this earth is God's gift to us and something that he delights in, and those relationships are broken. And we see that play out between us as individuals in when we do stuff that is will hurt someone else. But we also see that play out in like systemic way.
Yeah.
Like our sin is kind of baked into the systems and the structures that we built in our world, because those systems have been made by broken people.
Yeah.
And so we have a society that has racism baked into it in just the way that it functions, because it's been built by racist, broken people like me. And so it's learning to recognize that the brokenness in this world is a result of our brokenness, and then working to tackle that both in our own hearts and in the systems and structures around us.
Wow. Yeah, it's so good. Jen, have you got anything to say about that?
I don't think I can add much. I was just going to talk similarly about broken people, just that I try to remember that, like, everybody came into this world as a baby, and everybody has suffered or kind of had to grow up in this broken world, and then you trace it back, and a lot of the people who have done or have seemed to have done the most damage are the most damaged, and there's trauma, and there's all these things that have just come from years and years and years of mess. So yeah, that's what I was just going to add. Like, it's just, there's just so much like trauma that's happened over the years to people from young, when they were children. Like, we think of people as, like, I don't know, evil adults or something, but they were babies. So yeah. But the story's not finished. So, as Jedi said, we get a chance to rewrite that story. It's exciting.
Come on. That's so good. Thank you guys for chatting about that. That's amazing. I think we're going to go on to friendships now, because a question that we got on Instagram, a lot of people said, why does God allow people to cause climate change? Or why does God allow people to be mean to you in a friendship? Or why does God allow racism? And it's actually like, no, it's not God. It's our brokenness, and it's our sin. It's our nature. But one of the questions I had was, what's your advice for someone who's struggling in friendships? We've all struggled in friendships. Well, I have. I know that I have. I've been a teenage girl, haven't we all? But what's your advice for someone who's struggling in friendships and they just can't see God as a friend? Because God is described as Father, friend, everything, Holy Spirit, all of those things. How can... sometimes when we've been so hurt by friendships, it's hard to see God as a friend. How can we get through those hardships in friendships, but also see God as that friend?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, that's deep. Jen, have you got anything to say about that? Sorry, I put that on you guys.
No, it's fine. It is a really hard question when you're struggling with that hurt. But I don't know, you got to think, God he's the best friend, like, and all this hurt that you could be carrying from other friendships, he's the one that actually, he wants you to take that to him. He's like your top friend, like above all the other, like, earthly best friends. And I remember when I was in school, I was about 15, and I remember I was feeling really hurt by friendships at school. And I remember clearly this one day, and I went into school, and that whole day I just kind of, like, it makes it sound really weird, but like, I kind of just like chatted to Jesus in my head all day. Just chatting, just like kind of not praying, but just like in my head, just felt like somebody was with me all day. And that's the beautiful thing, like, he actually is with you. The Holy Spirit is with you all the time. Like, there aren't many friends who can do that. And I know that, like, we are so connected now. We can text our friends all day, but like, you don't even need to get a phone out. Like, he's with you, and he wants to be that kind of close where you can tell everything to. And that's the only way I can liken it to being the closest friend, because he knows the bad parts of you already, so you don't need to worry about that. And he loves you anyway. So you kind of just got to accept that there is someone who is sticking with you, almost whether you like it or not. If you want to push him away, he's still sticking with you. And friends, like school friends or church friends, it's not that easy. It's not. But with Jesus, you can't push him away. You just can't. So I think hold on to that he's better than a best friend. Yeah. He's just so much better than a best friend.
Love that.
Yeah, I would definitely add to that and say, just look to Jesus. He's the representation of who God is. And I think it's so hard to sometimes talk to someone or something that you feel isn't there. But when we look at Jesus, we see the picture of who God is. And I've had a similar question with people struggling to see God as a good father when they've had broken relationships with their fathers. And I think, again, it was just the same. Look at Jesus, get to know him, the things he did, the things he said. And then the more you spend time with someone, the more you start to look like them. Brilliant. And you'll end up being that friend that the right people will be attracted to as well.
Yeah, love that. You got anything to say, Jack?
Yeah, I think similar to Jen, I had a moment where I lost one of my really close friends, and it was actually during that time where I encountered God as a friend in the most amazing way, and maybe in a way that I haven't really experienced since then, because it was a moment of like loneliness and like loss, and then in that time discovered that God loves me. I hear that all the time, but God actually enjoys my company and like likes to be with us, and to spend time with us and to chat with us and to draw, for us to draw near to him. And actually it's the most amazing thing to discover God as your friend. Yeah, so I'd really encourage you, if you're feeling like actually you've struggled in friendships and you can't see God as friend, to push in and just spend a bit more time of being like, oh God, like I want to hang out with you. Like, what can we do? Like, let's go for a walk together, and like, will you show me something in where we're going or what we're doing together?
Yeah.
Love that. I love that. And actually, on the back of that, I was thinking before, I'd love to ask you guys, how can you be a good friend when you feel like you're alone? And how can you be a good friend when you feel like you're doing all the work in a friendship? Maybe you're a friend with someone who's not a Christian and you feel like you're loving them like Jesus constantly, and they're actually maybe not being the best of friends to yourself. How can you keep on going with that friendship? Have you got any advice for people who may be in that situation?
Yeah, I do. I think it's really important to have somebody you can talk to about it, first of all, because sometimes when you're in that relationship, you might not always be able to see clearly how it is, how balanced it is. So it's important to have somebody like a youth leader, somebody maybe a bit older, a bit wiser than you, to be like, what do you think about this friendship? That's my first bit of advice. My second bit is that different friendships will do different things. And honestly, it's taken me this long and I'm still learning it. It's very rare that you will find a friend who can be your everything, because I told you that's already Jesus. So different friendships, they do different things. And some friendships, you will give more and you will feel like you're giving more than that person's giving back. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that it's not equal, so I shouldn't be friends with them. There might be another friend who gives more to you than you give to them. And I think sometimes we put so much pressure on friendships because we want them to be all perfect and all everything to us. Yeah. But actually, it's just a bit of give and take. And sometimes you'll have friends who you kind of meet in the middle, and that'll be great as well. But with a friendship, if it ever feels a bit unbalanced or maybe a bit unhealthy, or you're not comfortable, go and talk to somebody older about it, because it can be really difficult to navigate friendships. Like I said, I still struggle knowing am I giving too much? Am I not giving enough? It's hard, let alone being a teenager and doing it. So talk to somebody, but understand that every friendship looks different, so you can't really compare them as well.
Love that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Moving on quickly, because I've seen that we've not got that much time. We've got lots of questions. Someone's asked on the YouTube chat, are my Christian friends better for me than my non-Christian friends? That's a huge question. Does anyone want to start?
I can offer a little bit to this. I think friendships are a space where we influence each other. Like, because you're close to them and you're doing life with each other, you naturally rub off on each other. And it's kind of being aware of the ways your friendships do that, and like whether those kind of influences are good for us, and are life-giving and make us more of who Jesus calls us to be. And that doesn't mean don't have non-Christian friends. Do have non-Christian friends, lots of them. But just be aware of the ways that we influence each other and whether they're a good thing or not. When I was in year 6, a lot of my friends might get a lift home in a police car at the end of the school day, and they were my really good friends. But I remember talking to my parents about it, and them kind of just giving me that I don't know, a little life lesson of of being like, I can be a real encouragement to them and a blessing to them, but it's just making sure I didn't make the same mistakes that they did. Yeah. And so it's just learning about the ways that we influence each other and just being conscious of that.
Come on.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's not all of Jesus's friends could be called Christians today, but I think you're absolutely right. It's about being aware of where those friendships lead you, emotionally, physically, mentally as well, and just being aware of, sometimes you might need a bit of spiritual top-up before you go hang out with certain friends, so that you can be the one influencing them rather than the other way around, because I'm sure we've all experienced it at some point. And I think deep down you'll know, where those friendships lead you, because even, do you walk away from your Christian friends feeling like you can now judge others? So it's about finding the balance and making sure that they're healthy.
Love that. Jen, have you got anything to say for that, or?
Yeah, I'd just add as well, as somebody who kind of grew up in church pretty much, sometimes Christian friends can also be quite nasty. And I don't say that as a big generalization, but we're human. And just because there's a Christian friend label on it, it doesn't mean that, that they won't hurt you.
Come on, yeah.
So as much as somebody shares the same belief, doesn't make them perfect, doesn't make them a perfect friend. So you might have a Christian friend and find that actually they're kind of pushing me around a bit. Whereas you might have a friend who's not a Christian who can be really kind and really just kind and lovely to you. And it doesn't mean that your Christian friends will automatically be really, really great and non-Christian friends are terrible influence. It's about looking at the person and looking at, am I being built up in this? Am I being encouraged? And am I being a better person because of this friendship, or am I not? And I don't think dividing it Christian and non-Christian always is that simple.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. Okay, thank you guys for answering those questions. We're going to come back to a few of those if we have time for questions from the Instagram and YouTube chat. But really quickly, I want to talk about climate change. Jack, you did an awesome seminar about climate change, talking to us about, the effects of it and how maybe we can help stop it and play our part. But maybe if you could answer this for me, we've had a few questions about this as well. What can we do as little old us to try and stop climate change the best way that we can? And also maybe Jen and Jada as well, if you could speak into this, what are some of the resources that you're using to learn more about climate change? How are you educating yourself about it? Where can we start? Is there some places that you're like, you need to watch this, or you need to read this, you need to look at this? What are your advice?
Great, big question.
Yeah. Sorry.
What can we do? I would say, when I spoke yesterday evening, it's all blurring. I talked about the boy with the loaves of fish, and he offered what he had, and he chose to be faithful with what he did have. And I think that's a really important lesson for us when we engage with a huge challenge like climate change, of not feeling like we have to solve it all ourselves, but just being faithful with what we have. One of my favorite passages in the Bible is in Romans 12, where it says, in the Message version, it says, take your everyday, ordinary life, your eating, sleeping, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering, that actually all of those everyday decisions can be part of my offering of worship to God. And so the way that I choose to shop, and the kind of food I choose to eat, and whether I choose to cycle or get my parents to give me a lift to a school or a sport or something, all of those can be part of how I worship God. And so I can choose to say, oh, actually, I'm going to go without that extra top, or I'm going to choose to get that fair trade chocolate bar instead, or I'm going to choose to cycle even though it's raining, can be part of our worship. Yeah. And so it's just taking one step at a time and being like, God, what's the next thing that I can do on this journey to worship you with everything that I am?
Love that. That's great. Jen and Jada, have you got anything to say about that?
Yeah,
I think it's good. I think
go on,
Jen.
I think it's good. I think for me personally, climate change is it's something that I don't know, on my journey with. It's not something that I guess I am I don't know. It's not like I guess the people I spend time with, it's not something we often talk about. So I'm so encouraged by the way that young people are so passionate about climate change. It just gets me like, I don't know, it just gives me a kick up the bum all the time because I'm like, okay, I can do better. But there is that thing that it's like, I don't know, maybe you'd agree, maybe you disagree, Jack, but like not having this guilt that could come with it, that like, I should be doing more, oh, I should be doing more, oh, I shouldn't have this, I shouldn't have that. Especially if you're in a position financially where you don't have a lot, it can be really difficult. So I think, if I'm honest, like I said, I'm like a climate change novice. I'm like right at the bottom. So if you're with me, then let me know in the comments because I'd like to know that I'm like not on my own. But like I think finding the small steps you can take would probably be where we should start. Like finding the small steps, because I never think of something like let me walk instead of driving the car. I would do it, but I wouldn't think of it I wouldn't engage in it in that way. So I think don't worry, like what Jack said about saving the world. Just do the small things that you can, and don't worry if somebody else can do more than you, because you need to look at your situation and you can think, what can I change? And that's so good that we can talk to God about that and be like, what can I change? What can I do? What are the small things I can do to help? Rather than thinking, oh, I've got to do this. I'll never do it. What's the point? That's where I'm at.
Love that. That's great. Jado, have you got anything to say about it?
I mean, not much more than that.
No, yeah.
No.
I'm very similar. I think it's easy to see people like Jack who are living their lives completely for, Jesus and the climate, and you're like, wow, I wish I could be like them, and I wish I could be like Jack. And oh my gosh, Jack is amazing. He lived the whole year and put all of his waste in one jar. I am just blown away by that every single day. But it's amazing how actually we can be inspired by this. And like you were saying to me, Jack, like over the lockdown, like you've had takeaways still, and you've still done those things, and you've used rubbish. It's not like you're perfect in that, and actually we can use that as encouragement.
Yeah, definitely not perfect. I was getting a bit nervous as you were being like, Jack does this and that, because I do a lot that's still really bad for the planet. But I'm trying to find ways to live a bit better. What Jen said about guilt is really important. Like, let's not pretend that like me using a bamboo toothbrush is going to save the world while Shell still drill for more oil in the North Sea. Like, this is like the scale of those different things is not like my little actions are a drop in the ocean, but it's kind of a heart position or an attitude, isn't it, of being like, okay, I'm going to try and do my bit because I want to worship you with whatever I can, even if it's not a huge impact on the whole global issue. It's part of me saying, I love you, Jesus. So that guilt thing's really important for sure.
That's awesome. Jack, I feel like you're the right person to ask this. Is there a Netflix show or documentary or something that we all have access to, that we should all watch, that you're like, okay, there's one thing that you should all watch about climate change to change your opinion about it, or like to help you and encourage you and motivate you?
Wow. I wasn't ready for that question.
Sorry, yeah, I didn't. That's just something that came in my head just then.
One thing on Netflix. Well, I think a couple of places on Instagram is maybe a bit easier. So a friend of mine is on Instagram called Less Waste Laura.
Yeah.
She's amazing and makes it really accessible to kind of understand like the kind of changes that we can make, but also explaining kind of the big stuff that's going on in the world and what that means for us as individuals. She's a Christian and she talks about that, so I would encourage you to find her. And obviously We Are Tear Fund on Instagram. Laura's also on YouTube as well, so there's lots of stuff there to just try and help us understand what's going on.
Amazing.
And how we fit into that. Maybe come back to me with what to watch. I'll come back to you.
Maybe later on in the Luminosity week, Jack will just put something on the YouTube comments like, watch this, watch this, watch this. Less Waste Laura, I actually follow her and she's awesome. She puts loads of stuff about fast fashion as well, which I, as someone who buys into that quite often, unfortunately, I found that really helpful. Okay, we've got like 2 questions from the YouTube and from Instagram that I'd really like to ask us before we end. Is that okay, Alice? Can we go a bit over? Awesome, perfect. Okay, so one of the questions is, how do we bring our friends to Jesus without being called weird or sad, in a way which people actually connect with and want to know more about, but without bombarding them and scaring them off? How can we basically not be that weird Christian who's like, Jesus loves you all the time, oh my gosh? Do you guys have any ideas about that?
I think maybe rather than talking about it, just show them.
Come on, yeah.
Just be that friend that, even if it's weird at first, if you stay true to it, they will know that they can come to you for advice, to ask you for help, because they know that you won't judge them, you'll love them. And I think just love them. And it's not easy, forgiving them when they've wronged you. Obviously, there's a safe way to do that.
Yeah.
And not being a doormat, but still showing up when they need you and being reliable.
Yeah, come on. Jack and Jen, have you got anything to say about that?
I think there's space to be a bit weird as a Christian, and it makes space for conversations to start. Like at uni, some of my friends decided they weren't going to drink at all. Lots of us said, oh, we might have a drink, but we'll like draw a line. And that kind of opened up a bit of a space, and they thought we were a bit weird, but it was a space where a conversation started. Or like we started a homeless kitchen, so we would go out and we'd cook like a stew for people who are homeless in our city, and we would do that like on a Saturday night, and everyone was like, why do you do this? And it was a chance to talk about God. And so I think don't be afraid to live your faith in a way that does look a bit different to the world around you. Like we're called to be in this world and to hang out with everyone else, but not to be fully blended in with the world. So like be proud that you're a little bit different and use that as an opportunity to share.
Yes. Jen, have you got anything to say about that?
I'd say the same. I think the word weird has a really bad rep, but there's nothing wrong with being different as long as it's genuine. But if you're the type of person that you get really excited and really buzzy about things, then when you're telling someone about Jesus, you probably are going to be really buzzy and really excited. If you're quite a relaxed person, then you don't need to then become that person to tell someone about Jesus. You need to be authentic and be yourself. And being weird is literally just doing something that isn't the norm. So believing in a God that we can't physically see, it is a bit weird, let's be honest. Like it's not the norm, like otherwise we'd all be Christians, like and it's okay. And I think once you've got that confidence that actually people might find you a bit weird, but that's okay, like we'll all be weird together, it's fine.
Yes, then, I love that.
Then let's just not worry about people thinking you're weird, because we are.
Yeah, that's so awesome as well, isn't it? Because let's be honest, Jesus was the ultimate, if you're going to call weird. Like, he was crazy. He flipping died on the cross, and everyone was like, why are you dying on the cross? Like, why would you do that? People were literally mocking him as he was on the cross. But because of that, he saved us, and we need to glorify God in the best way we can. And if that's been a bit weird and a bit crazy for Jesus, then I'm here for it, because ultimately, I want to live my life to glorify God.
Yeah.
Awesome. We've got one more question. I think this is the last one. And I'm just going to find it. Okay. How did you all get into youth work? So, Jen, obviously, you've just left youth work, but how did you get into it? Jadai, I know that you work for Youth for Christ, isn't it? That's definitely youth work. And Jack, you work for Tear Fund, which is definitely youth work. So, how have you guys got into it? What are your tips for maybe someone who wants to get into leadership? And we also had a question. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit. But we had a question. Someone asked, how do I get into leadership if I don't feel confident to start? And they don't feel confident that is maybe something that they can do. So how did you get into youth work, and your tips for someone who maybe isn't confident to step into leadership roles? Bit of a mouthful.
I'll go first, that's all right.
Yeah, go for it.
I'd say just volunteer where you can.
Yeah.
So with your local church, as soon as you kind of maybe get to the older end of your youth group, I'll speak to your youth leader and say, like, oh, I'm really interested in like maybe starting a journey as a youth leader. How can I help? How can I get involved? Because that's what I did. I just did youth work my whole life, like here and there, wherever I was. Like I kind of just cared about young people and wanted to see them do well. And in that, it did lead to a job for me, but it doesn't always. And I just was really happy when I was serving young people. And with the confidence thing, you grow in that.
Yeah.
And as long as you're spending time, like I said, with somebody who probably is your youth leader, you say like, oh, I'd like to be a youth leader. Could you kind of help me? Could you teach me? Like we use the word mentor, but maybe that sounds a bit formal. Like, could you kind of show me how to do it and like let me practice in a smaller group? Like, don't think you're going to maybe get up there and not have to speak in front of your whole youth group or do something really, really big. It might just be that, like, I don't know, let's say you're a 15-year-old boy, you might just have to share with like 2 11-year-old boys, and actually suddenly that's not so scary, and you start in baby steps and you build your confidence. But that happens over time. And there are really, really amazing youth leaders who would love to guide you on that. Like, I'm telling you, like, as a youth leader, like, when I was working, there is nothing more exciting than when somebody says, oh, I would love to be involved in youth work. I'm like, yes, come on then. Let me draw that out of you. Like, it's what we love to do. So be encouraged and speak to somebody, because I bet they'd be really excited for you.
Awesome. You guys got anything to speak about that?
Yeah, just like Jen said, mine started with volunteering as well, at church, with the organization I now work with. Yeah, just get involved however you can. Maybe it's just, shadowing someone, or, asking to just help out once a week or so, whatever that looks like. And in terms of leadership, leadership in itself, a leader is just someone who has influence. And you already have that, you already have that over yourself, over your siblings, your friends. And so if the word scares you, just pause for a moment and think about the fact that you're already a leader. And it's just, like Jen said, it's just something you grow into.
Awesome.
Similarly to these guys, my kind of journey with youth work started with volunteering. After finishing my A-levels, I did a gap year with a youth church and learnt loads about youth work during that time. Before that and during that, I was volunteering at what Luminosity used to be in Thirst, and learning loads about youth work there, and then continued to do that. And I think if you're someone who wants to kind of grow in leadership, but you're a bit unconfident and you're not sure if like what to do, talk to a leader that you trust, someone that you admire, and just say, can I learn from you? Talitha talked amazingly yesterday about having a mentor. And actually, if there is a youth worker that you really think, I would love to be able to lead like them, just see if they're up for spending a bit of time with you and helping to share with you the ways that they learnt to lead in the way that they do.
Oh, guys, so much wisdom. I love that. Thank you so much. Has any of our panelists got any final words that they'd like to say before we wrap this up? Anything? No? Awesome.
Keep going, you're awesome.
Hey, thank you so much, guys, for watching. If you're still watching, we're 10 minutes late. I'm really sorry. Go enjoy the rest of your afternoon. We're back again at 7 tonight for our evening celebration. Thank you so much, Jedi and Jen and Jack, for being here and being so open and honest and just loving on us with all your wisdom. We so appreciate it. We're going to be back here at 4:30 tomorrow to talk more. We're going to be talking with Naomi Allen from Open Doors, which we're so excited about because Open Doors are our sponsors this year. Go check out all of the seminars today and tomorrow. Go catch up on them, and we'll see you later. But thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.